Hello and welcome everybody. We are proud to present to you our SAP EWM Basic Customizing Guide, SAP EWM 110+1. Why +1? Because we always try to give you a little bit extra you won't get in other courses out there. More insights, more connections between the separate elements of SAP EWM, more truly relevant topics. We try to focus on the really important parts, how we can set them up in the EWM system, and how they influence other settings and objects in the EWM. Our goal was to provide the best basic SAP EWM customizing guide out there that enables you to truly understand how SAP EWM works and how you can set up a basic customizing yourself. And in the second part of this course, we are going to focus on the following topics. The outbound process in SAP EWM. We will take a deep dive into the warehouse order creation. You will learn about the physical inventory process in SAP EWM. We are going to have a look at the post-processing framework. And we also included a performance guide that shows you how customizing and other settings influence the overall SAP EWM performance. If you have a look at the course curriculum, we tried to set it up as detailed as we possibly could, so you really of our SAP Extended Warehouse Management Customizing Guide. In this section, we are going to have a look at the outbound process in the SAP EWM system. We are going to focus on what objects and documents are involved and how we can determine the stock we want to pick and send out to our customers with setting up a proper stock removal strategy. But for now, let us first have a look at the different goals we want to achieve in this part of the course. You will understand what documents are involved during the outbound process. You will be able to describe warehouse process types for the outbound process, and you will be able to set up a warehouse process type determination. You will be able to describe the use of stock removal rules, and you will be able to customize them. And for achieving those goals, let us start from the beginning with creating an outbound delivery. You know what you will get. And now let us have a look at this together. Since we are in a transition phase right now with a lot of different SAP EWM and ERP and S/4HANA installations out there, we decided to go with a decentralized SAP EWM installation in this case. If you are only interested in embedded versions, feel free to skip this part. Although we think it makes sense to know about any kind of installation. The outbound process starts in the ERP or S4 ERP system with creating an outbound delivery. If there are items within the delivery that are related to the decentralized SAP EWM, the ERP or S4 system will transfer the delivery to the EWM system. Again, depending if we operate an SAP EWM 9.5 or an SAP EWM S4, the EWM will create a so-called outbound delivery request. This request is basically a copy of the ERP outbound delivery, and the document number is the same as within the ERP system. As we already mentioned, this object will be obsolete in the future, since SAP plans to skip this extra document in the EWM system. But for now, most installations out there work with this object, so we are going with it as well. Like we already had it in the inbound process with the inbound delivery notification, the outbound delivery request basically serves as an object to check all the data we need for processing the outbound delivery in the EWM system. These checks, for example, include whether all master data, like for example the product and the batches, are known to the EWM system. Depending on our customizing settings for the post-processing framework, the system will create the object the EWM actually performs the outbound process with, the so-called outbound delivery order. This object does not only include the ERP data like before, but also some EWM specific attributes we need in order to perform the whole outbound process with. These attributes are included into the outbound delivery order with the help of service profiles for the outbound document type. And as we already mentioned, the outbound delivery order is the actual object or document, if you will, that will follow us through the whole outbound process in the SAP Extended Warehouse Management. The document of the outbound delivery order operates the stock removal warehouse tasks for the picking process and all other processes, like for example a packing process, a staging in the goods issue zone, or a loading process into the actual truck. So far so good for the decentralized outbound process overview. Let us now have a look at some settings we need to make in order to get the transfer from the outbound delivery in the ERP system to the actual outbound delivery order in the EWM system to work. As we already told you, when the outbound delivery gets transferred from the ERP system to the EWM system, the EWM creates the so-called outbound delivery request. And for creating any kind of request in the EWM, we need to provide some information of how we want it to be created, or better said, with which attributes we want it to be created. We need to set up a mapping of how the ERP data is supposed to be translated into the EWM world. Like for example, we need to map the ERP document type to an EWM document type. And of course, we need to do the same thing for the item types as well. We need to map the dates provided by the ERP system and the partner roles as well. We need all this mapping so the EWM system knows what kind of request and eventually what kind of outbound delivery order we want to be created. A pretty basic approach could be to map every document type to just one EWM type, for example. But in most cases, we need to separate the orders in the EWM system as well, because some customer deliveries may have some sort of priority compared to intralogistic transfer deliveries, for example. And how such a mapping is set up, we are going to have a look at next. So let us head to the EWM customizing. We open the Extended Warehouse Management node. We go to Interfaces. We open ERP Integration. And we head for the delivery processing. And here we have the different mapping options we can maintain. So let us start from the top with mapping the document types. And this is where we can set up how the different ERP document types are mapped to the corresponding EWM delivery types. We can't really go into detail about this that much, cause some companies are very simple when it comes to document types, and they only have a few ones, while other companies use maybe several hundreds. But I guess you get the point of how this customizing works. So let us head back and check out the other mapping options. The item types. Here we basically have the same logic like we just had it with the first customizing option. Just this time one level beneath. For the combination of the document type and the respective item type, we can maintain which EWM item type is to be used. But as you can see, the customizing table can also be maintained a little more detailed, like if we use catch weight products, for example. But in most cases, this is also very easy to set up. So on to the next topic. The date types mapping. For each date type per document type, we can maintain how those values are supposed to be translated into EWM. With these dates and times, we can control the deliveries, or better said, the orders in the EWM system. Like for example, this mapping includes the goods issue date and time, for example. Or we can even provide information of when a delivery is supposed to be loaded, for example. And now let us check out the next mapping node. And this time we are talking about the partner roles. And here we got the information like to which partner we want to map the carrier, or the vendor, for example. But of course, we also have the possibility to set up our own partner roles in the EWM system and map them right here, like we did it with all the partner roles marked with a C. And now we got one setting left, which is very important. So let us have a look. The control message processing. Of course, we see that we can maintain the number range intervals, which is in charge of providing the correct ERP number ranges if we create a split delivery in the EWM system by performing a partial goods issue, for example. But the interesting part, well, at least in my opinion, is the HU parameter dropdown, because this allows us to maintain whether we want to send data about the handling units to the ERP system when we post a goods issue, or if we just want to send information about the quantities to the ERP system. Well, and that is it on the mapping part in this chapter. When an outbound delivery gets transferred to the EWM system. By the way, this customizing is also for inbound deliveries as well. We just wanted to cover it when explaining the outbound process. We already told you that the outbound delivery order is the actual document we create our stock removal warehouse tasks with. And for creating those stock removal warehouse tasks, we obviously need a warehouse process type. When the EWM system creates the outbound delivery order, there is a warehouse process type determination for every item. These warehouse process types have the following features. Key for the warehouse process category. Determination during the activation of the outbound delivery order. Adopted into the stock removal warehouse tasks. And now let us have a look at the basic settings we need to make for the warehouse process types for the outbound process. So we head to the EWM customizing. We open the extended warehouse management node. We head to the cross-process settings. We open the warehouse task node and we click on define warehouse process type. Now, for explanation purposes, we are just going to go with a warehouse process type already predefined by the SAP standard, the warehouse process type 2010. And now let us have a look at what settings we need to make in order to tell the EWM system that this specific warehouse process type is for stock removal warehouse tasks. We need to set the warehouse process category to 2, which stands for stock removal. And we set the activity to pick, well, for picking or stock removal process. So far on the mandatory attributes we need in order to use this warehouse process type for the stock removal process. But of course, we can also maintain some non-mandatory attributes if we need them for our specific warehouse processes. Like for example, we can set the SI control to C for always assign stock identification anew. We can set the flag for automatic wave creation. This flag basically allows us to perform an automatic wave creation, of course, if our warehouse operates waves. And we can set the fields for a destination storage type and bin, meaning all stock removal warehouse tasks created with this specific warehouse process type will point to the entries we make right here. As we already mentioned, these were some non-mandatory settings we can make if we need them for our warehouse. And that was how we can set up the warehouse process type for using it in the outbound and stock removal process in the SAP Extended Warehouse Management. But as we already had it a few times during the course of our SAP EWM 110+1 customizing guide, only defining stuff doesn't do the trick. We need to maintain a determination for the warehouse process type as well. And that is exactly what we are going to tackle next. Warehouse process type determination. Now that we customized the warehouse process type so that we can operate the outbound and stock removal process with it, we need to set up a determination so that when the EWM system activates the outbound delivery order, the system can determine which warehouse process type is to be used for which item. So let us have a look at how such a determination process looks like. So let us head to the EWM customizing once again. We open the Extended Warehouse Management node. We head to the cross-process settings. We open the warehouse task node and we click on Determine Warehouse Process Type. And for this explanation, let us just go with the warehouse process type 2010 again, just like we had it in the previous example. In this case, for the warehouse number 0001 and the document type OUTB, we want the EWM system to use the warehouse process type 2010. Pretty basic. For customizing the determination logic, the following entries are mandatory: the warehouse number and the document type. If you want to determine separate warehouse process types for the different items, or maybe according to some special processes, we can set the following fields. The item type. Exactly like the document type, this information is taken directly out of the outbound delivery order for determining it. And the same applies for the delivery priority, meaning we can use some other warehouse process type if we want to separate standard and express deliveries, for example. And we can use the options process type determination and the process indicator to determine different warehouse process types according to some special processes. Maybe we are talking about some value-added services right here. And that is how we can set up a determination of the warehouse process types for the outbound process in SAP EWM. And in order to execute the picking process in the EWM system, we obviously need some stock removal warehouse tasks first. And for the warehouse task creation, we need to determine where we want the stock to be picked out of. And the first part of that determination is obviously the storage type. Well, and like we had it with the put-away warehouse tasks during the inbound process explanation, we need to maintain basically two steps for that determination. We need to define a storage type search sequence. And we need a determination of this storage type search sequence. The storage type search sequence is basically a definition with a list that should answer the following questions. In which storage types do we want the EWM system to search for the stock? In which sequence do we want the EWM to search? And do we want stock in transportation units to be part of the search as well? And how such a storage type search sequence looks like in the EWM system, we are going to have a look at right now. So let us head to the customizing once again. We open the Extended Warehouse Management node. This time we head for the Goods Issue Process node. We click on Strategies. And we go for the Specify Storage Type Search Sequence option. On the right side of the screen, we see a list of the different storage type search sequences we got in our test system. And for explanation purposes, let us just go with the one called tie. So we choose this one and double click on the assigned storage types for this search sequence. And with this example, we got one entry which basically reads like this. In the warehouse number 150, the storage type search sequence tie is supposed to search for the stock we want to pick in the storage type ATL. We do not want the system to use a storage type group, and we also do not want to search for stock in existing transportation units. This is actually pretty straightforward. And if we want to include another storage type, we just need to enter an additional line with a sequence number 2 and add another storage type for this specific search sequence. Now we have the possibility to let the EWM system search for the stock we want to send to our customers. But as you might already know it by now, we somehow need to tell the EWM system to use which storage type search sequence. So basically a determination of the correct storage type search sequence. But before we come to that point, we first need to check out the other attributes that have an impact on the determination. So let us have a look. Stock Removal Control Indicator. Up to now, we defined a storage type search sequence and added the storage types we want the EWM system to search for the stock in. But of course, just like we had it in the inbound process with a put-away control indicator, we can also maintain that logic not just based on the warehouse process type of the inbound delivery item, or since we are in the outbound process right now, the warehouse process type of the outbound delivery order item. We can also add product-specific indicators, the so-called Stock Removal Control Indicator. The approach is pretty much the same as we had it during the inbound process. We define such a Stock Removal Control Indicator and add it to the specific products we want to use it. And to see what that looks like, let us head back to the EWM customizing. And we are going to go for the same node we had before. Under the Extended Warehouse Management, Goods Issue Process, Strategies. And this time we go for the Define Stock Removal Control Indicator option. And just like we had it in the inbound process, we define what stock removal indicator we want to have in the EWM system. There's basically nothing more to it. Just a definition that we got, for example, a shoe removal indicator or maybe a textile stock removal indicator. But this definition offers us the possibility to add it to certain kinds of products in the warehouse product maintenance. For this example, we are going to go with a nice handbag again. And on the tab for the warehouse data, we can see the stock removal indicator. So basically, we defined a stock removal indicator called text, and we assigned it to our nice handbag. And how that plays out when we want to determine a storage type search sequence, we are going to have a look at next. Storage type search sequence determination. Now we defined all the attributes that come into play for the EWM searching for stock. Well, at least in which storage types we want the system to search. But as we already mentioned quite a few times, defining stuff alone doesn't do the trick. So we again need some sort of determination. And when it comes to the determination of the storage type search sequence, we got the following attributes that come into play. The object laying the foundation is of course the outbound delivery order. And since you know that warehouse process types, for example, are determined on item level, the foundation is actually the outbound delivery order item. And within the outbound delivery order item, we got several attributes. Like of course the warehouse number, the actual product the customer ordered, the determined warehouse process type when the outbound delivery order was created, and the stock type. And when it comes to the actual product the customer ordered, we got two additional attributes. The stock removal control indicator, we just showed you a few seconds ago, and whether the product is some hazardous goods, for example. And all these attributes we now see on the left side of the screen are taken into consideration when the EWM system checks the customizing settings we made for determining a proper storage type search sequence. And the result of that determination should be a storage type search sequence we want the EWM to use for searching for the actual stock, and the stock removal rule. What exactly that is, we are going to check out in the next episodes. And that is how this determination works. So let us have a look at how this is set up in the EWM customizing. Well, and since we are already in the right customizing path, we just head for the determine storage type search sequence node this time. And at first glance, this may also seem familiar to you, as it is pretty much the same customizing like we had it with the inbound process. Now let us just walk through an example. Let us just go with this one. This entry basically translates like this. In the warehouse number 150, we want products marked with the stock removal control indicator text and getting delivered with an outbound delivery order item that determined a warehouse process type 2010 to use the storage type search sequence text and the stock removal rule FIFO. And like we already showed you in this schematic picture, the determination logic can of course be set up more detailed, like using the hazardous goods indicators 1 and 2 or the stock type, for example. But of course we do not need to make it more complicated than it actually is. So the most common determination will always be done either with a stock removal control indicator or a warehouse process type, or well, a combination of these two settings. Now we almost have it, but we got one more option we can use. So let us head back and have a look at the optimization of the access. With this customizing table, we have the option of how the EWM system is going to read this table we just had a look at for the determination. With this example, we first want the system to check for both values, for the stock removal control indicator and the warehouse process type. If no search sequence could be determined using this option, we want the EWM system to go on using just the warehouse process type, and in the next case, just to go with the stock removal indicator. Basically, we know what settings we made before, and here we have the possibility to optimize the determination access. Normally, we set the most detailed access in the beginning, leading to the least detailed option in the end. And that was how the EWM system determines a proper storage type for the actual stock we want to send out to our customers. With these strategies, we can maintain in which order the EWM system is going to use storage bins for the stock removal process. Up to now we defined how we want the EWM system to determine a storage type, and now it is time for the actual storage bin determination where our stock is actually located. And in charge of the bin determination is the so-called stock removal rule. The stock removal rule is maintained on storage type level, and it defines a sorting template for choosing the stock for the stock removal process. Of course, for the storage type we maintain such a stock removal rule for have to be included into the storage type search sequences we just had a look at in the previous episode. Like we showed you in this schematic picture, after the EWM system determined the correct storage type search sequence, the customizing leads us to a specific storage type within the sequence. And that storage type provides the information of how we want to sort the available stock with the stock removal rule. And for sorting the stock, we can use every field of the available stock database table in the SAP EWM system, and that table is called SCWM Aqua. By the way, if you are interested in how some of the most important database tables work in the EWM system, we recommend you to check out our SAP Extended Warehouse Management course on the SAP EWM database tables, available on our website. Now let us have a look at how such a sorting of the available quantities within a storage type works. Let us assume we have a storage type search sequence that includes the storage types ATL at sequence number 1 and PAL at sequence number 2. Within the storage types, the product we are searching for is located on 5 bins that provide available quantity. The unsorted table is basically in a random order, except for the storage types of course, since this information is already existing due to the search sequence. And now we want to use the stock removal rule that we customized with the following sorting options. We want the list to be sorted by the goods receipt date ascending and by the available quantity descending. And applying that rule sorts the table like this. Within the given storage type search sequence, meaning no matter how old a quant actually is, the system will sort it by the storage type first, at least if we are not working with storage type groups. And within the storage types, the sorting was applied like the stock removal rule was customized. We got the oldest stock first, and within each year ascending sorting by the available quantity. And that is pretty much it on how the sorting works, at least in theory. So let us check out how that stock removal rules can be set up in the SAP EWM system. And since we are already in the correct customizing topic, let us have a look at the Specify Stock Removal Rule node. And for explanation purposes, we are going with maybe the most common and most often used rule out there. The first in, first out stock removal rule. So let us have a look at how this specific rule sorts our available quantities. The screen now shows us that in the warehouse number 150, the stock removal rule FIFO sorts the quants by one attribute, the WDATU field from the SAP EWM Aqua, meaning the goods receipt date of the quants. And since we did not set the descending flag, which would make absolutely no sense for a first in first out rule, this means we want the oldest quants on top of the list. But with a basically free to define sorting, almost any kind of stock removal rule is possible to maintain right here. If we just have a look at this list of available sorting fields, basically anything is possible. And as we already told you that the storage type is in charge of telling the EWM system on how we want to search for the available quantities, let us have a look at where we can customize that. So let us head back. This time we go for the master data node. And we head to the define storage type option. We just pick some random entry right now. And within the storage type definition screen, we scroll a little bit down. And within the storage removal control section, we find the option to add a stock removal rule to this specific storage type. And when we check out the F4 help, we can see the entries we just had a look at, the available stock removal rules per warehouse number. And that is it on the customizing. Some of the most common and often used sorting options are, for example, a first in, first out, a strict FIFO, last in, first out, and by the expiration date. But actually, none of these stock removal rules and their sorting comes as a predefined option. But let us have a quick look at how those rules could be set up. First in, first out. Like almost all timestamp specific strategies, this first in, first out principle is purely based on the stock removal rule. And in this case, the sorting is done as we just had it a few seconds ago when we had a look at the customizing. The sorting is done with the WDATU field for the goods receipt date. Strict first in, first out. You might ask yourself what the difference between this option and the previous one actually is, and the answer is pretty simple. With the first in, first out rule from before, we are only going for a first in, first out kind of sorting within the separate storage types of the storage type search sequence. With a strict first in, first out rule, the sorting is pretty much the same, but not within each storage type individually, but with sorting a storage type group. The storage type group is a customizing setting to group certain storage types and treat them as equals within the storage type search sequence. So the sorting eventually doesn't take place for each storage type individually, but for the whole list of bins within all storage types of the storage type group. Last in, first out. Some industries cannot operate a first in, first out principle based on the products that they store in their warehouse. As soon as you start to stack goods on top of each other during the put away process, a first in, first out rule would make sense, since the warehouse worker would have to destack all the goods before eventually reaching the bottom product. And in this case, a last in, first out rule could make sense. And customizing such a rule is actually pretty simple, since it is basically nothing else than a first in, first out rule, just with a descending sorting instead of an ascending one. Expiration date. This again is some sort of time-specific rule, and for customizing this rule we can go for an ascending expiration date. Now, to finish the topic about the stock removal rules, we want to mention some aspect which we think is pretty important. When we execute some sort of sorting by the available quantity, again, like we did it in this schematic presentation before, we need to think about what we actually want. Do we want a stock removal process as efficient as possible, or do we want what is best for the warehouse? The most efficient way to perform the stock removal process is that the warehouse worker has to take the least steps possible to operate the picking warehouse tasks. That again would result in the fact that we do a descending sorting of the available quantities. But this again could result in the fact that we produce a lot of broken up packages in the warehouse. And the other way around, sorting the available quantities ascending will result in a very efficient way for the warehouse to not have a high amount of broken up packages, but may result in the fact that the warehouse worker has to take more steps, since he may have to pick single pieces from different storage bins, for example. Just some things we should keep in mind of what such a sorting results in, but also what kind of possibilities we have.